Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another English class here on verbling.com. My name is Lisa, and I'm one of the English teachers here at Verbling. And in this hour, we're going to be having a reading class. So if you have a reservation already for this class, you can go ahead and use it now. If you don't have a reservation, that's okay. You can join the class when you see the Join Class button. The Verbling classes are available for members only. You can participate if you are a member. If you're not yet a member, then you can watch for free and follow along, and you can also watch the recordings. But if you want to actually participate, read, discuss, practice your English, then you do need to become a member. So let me say hi, guys. Hi, Victor. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. And hi, Amparo. How are you? Hi, Amparo. Are you there? Maybe you're still loading. And Jewel, how are you? Hi, Jewel. I can't hear you. Maybe you're not muted, but I can't hear anything. Maybe try refreshing the page or checking the sound or the input of your microphone. Yeah, come back. And Amparo, how's it going? Is it working for you? I'm not hearing you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
it's good.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. What about you?
Good. I'm doing well too. Thanks. Okay, let's see if Jules back. I hear you a little bit. It's just not very loud.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just very soft. Not too loud. Maybe you have to talk louder or something.
Okay.
Yeah. What about for you guys? Can you hear her? Amparo or Victor?
As if she is far, far away from microphone.
Yeah, it sounds like far away.
I cannot hear anything.
You can't hear anything? Okay. Yeah, so let's see. Jules, sometimes if you check on the settings up at the top, it shows like where your microphone is, if it's on default or if it's on a built-in microphone or something. So maybe changing that might help. It's on the top bar of the Google Hangouts where you have like the telephone on the right, and then next to it is like a gear, and that's called the settings.
Okay.
So,
I set
yeah.
it now. It's louder.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't actually know if it's picking up right here. It might just be on your computer. So it might be if you're far away from your computer microphone, that might be the reason. Sometimes I don't know if these actually work when you have them in the computer. Okay, guys, well, let's go ahead. Some other people might join us. If you want, you can click on the link, or you can just follow along by reading what you see in the screen. We're going to be reading this article that I got from The Guardian. I'm going to put the link up there again. The Guardian is a newspaper out of the United Kingdom, England. So, and it's about language learning. So I thought it would be interesting for you guys and for me. I'm also a language learner. So we're going to read through this, go over some vocabulary and expressions and things. And then if we have time, we will discuss it a little bit, see if you think these are good language learning tips. Like I said, if other people join us, then we'll just add them to the mix. Otherwise, we'll just read ourselves. It's called Learning a Language, 10 Things You Need to Know. Okay, thinking about learning a foreign language? From ignoring your age to avoiding the F word, not the normal F word we think of, our multilingual experts shared their tips. Okay, so the number one tip is make realistic, specific goals. You have decided to learn another language. Now what? On our recent live chat, our panelists' first piece of advice was to ask yourself, what do you want to achieve and by when? Donovan White, Vice President of Enterprise and Education at Rosetta Stone, says language learning is best when broken down into manageable goals that are achievable over a few months. This is far more motivating and realistic. You might be feeling wildly optimistic when you start, but aiming to be fluent is not necessarily the best idea. Phil McGowan, director at Verb Maps, recommends making these goals tangible and specific. Why not set yourself a target of being able to read a newspaper article in the target language without having to look up any words in the dictionary? Okay, Victor, why don't we go ahead and start with you? You can read all of that. Is it big enough in the... I'll make it a little bigger so you guys can see it better in your screen there. Okay, go ahead.
Which part I have to read?
You can start from the beginning, actually, and all the way to the last after dictionary right there.
Okay. Learning a language, 10 things you need to know. Thinking about learning a foreign language, from ignoring your age to avoiding the F word, our multilingual experts share their tips. First, make realistic, specific goals. You have decided to learn another language. Now what? On our recent live chat, our panelists' first piece of advice was to ask yourself, what do you want to achieve and by when? Donovan White, Vice President of Enterprise and Education at Rosetta Stone, says, language learning is best when broken down into manageable goals that are achievable over a few months. This is far more motivating and realistic. You might be feeling wildly optimistic when you start, but aiming to be fluent is not necessarily the best idea. Phil McGowan, director of Verb Maps, recommends making these goals tangible and specific. Why not set yourself a target of being able to read a newspaper article in the target language without having to look up any words in the dictionary?
Okay, good. So now I will go over some of these words, and if you guys have any questions at any time, go ahead and just ask me. You can write in the Verbling chat, but it's easier if you just turn on your microphone and ask. Okay, so a couple of things. From ignoring your age, so not thinking about how old you are, and avoiding the F word, which we're going to find out which F word are they talking about. So these guys are multilingual experts, and they're sharing their tips or advice, suggestions for how to learn a language. So the first one is talking about making goals. So a goal is something you want to achieve, you want to be able to do, and they're talking about making realistic and specific. So something you can actually achieve in a shorter amount of time, and being very specific. Sometimes people, they say, I want to learn English and I want to be fluent. That's their goal. But they're advising people to take it in smaller chunks. Don't start off saying, I want to be fluent in English. That is a long process. Instead, you might want to learn how to introduce yourself, or something first. So let's see. Panelists, those are the people on a panel. A panel is just a group of people who are being asked questions, usually like at a conference or something. You have a panel of speakers. So one of those speakers is called a panelist, and then, of course, plural is panelists. All right, so they asked their advice. Let's see, this guy's the Vice President of Enterprise. That just means of business and education at Rosetta Stone, which is a popular language learning software. And so he's saying language learning is best when broken down into, so when we're talking about to break something down into smaller pieces or manageable goals, we're just separating it. So that's what to break something down means, to kind of tear it apart and break it into pieces. And in this case, manageable ones. So instead of saying, I want to be fluent, you say, I want to be able to do this, and maybe give yourself a time period even. And these are more motivating. So these goals, these type of goals help you to keep being motivated and being realistic instead of saying, you wouldn't want to start off with, I want to read, English literature, Shakespeare in the original form before, right when you're starting to learn English. That's a big goal. Not realistic, probably. All right, so you might be feeling wildly optimistic. So wildly means like very crazy optimistic, like you think you're going to be able to be fluent in, 1 month or something. But it's not usually the best idea to aim for that, to aim for fluency in a very short time. To aim for something means to make that as your goal. Instead, you want to make something that's tangible so that you can reach. Tangible actually is something like you can touch, you can reach, you're going to be able to achieve it in a certain amount of time. That's your target, is what you want to achieve. So for example, your goal or your target could be just to read a simple newspaper article without having to look up any words in a dictionary so you can understand. That's a goal. Okay, remind yourself why you are learning. It might sound obvious, but recognizing exactly why you want to learn a language is really important. Alex Rawlings, a language teacher now learning his 13th language, says motivation is usually the first thing to go, especially among students who are teaching themselves. To keep the momentum going, he suggests writing down 10 reasons you are learning a language and sticking it to the front of the file you are using. I turn to these in times of self-doubt. Why am I doing this? Okay. Amparo.
Remind yourself.
I hear you.
I cannot see. Remind yourself why you are learning. It might sound obvious, but recognizing exactly why you want to learn a language is really important. Alex Rawlings, a language teacher now learning his 13th language, says motivation is usually the first thing to go. Especially among students who are teaching themselves. To keep the momentum going, he suggests writing down 10 reasons you are learning a language and sticking it to the front of the file you are using. I turn to these in times of self-doubt.
Yeah. So if something sounds obvious, it's like, duh. You're like, I know that already. So it's kind of an obvious idea that you would want to know why you're doing something. But in fact, people sometimes forget why. So that's what he's saying. So you want to recognize, and this is a British article, so they're using the British spelling of some words. In American English, we would have a Z here, for example, but it doesn't matter. So you want to recognize or understand what is really important to you. Why are you doing this? Because learning a language is a long-term process, and if you don't use it, a lot of times you forget it. So it's it's kind of an ongoing process. So this guy, he's actually from England as well, UK, and he's has been learning 13 different languages. So he's saying, from his expert opinion, motivation is usually the first thing to go. So to go means it's the thing that leaves you. You become less motivated. You start off very motivated, like, yes, I'm going to learn English or Portuguese or Spanish or French or whatever. And then after a couple weeks or even a couple months, you get, your motivation leaves you. It's the first thing to go. You like, why am I doing this? So especially for people who are teaching themselves, so people like Verbling students who are taking it upon themselves to go to classes, read, listen, things like that. So you want to try to keep the momentum going, keep your your motivation up. The momentum is like how you keep doing something. If you lose momentum, it's kind of like you stop taking classes, you stop reading, you stop speaking, you've lost your momentum. But if you keep up your momentum, it means you keep working at it. You keep taking classes. You keep trying to learn more and more. So his suggestion, or what he suggests as the verb, is to write down. So a lot of times we just say to write, but when we mean write down, that's phrasal verb, we actually mean like on a piece of paper or something like that. So you write down your reasons why, and then you stick it, maybe you write it on a Post-it note or something like that, and then you can stick it to the front of your file that you're using. So, if you have papers or books or something like this, it's a reminder is what we call that. That's a reminder. So when you have self-doubt and you're like, why am I doing this? Why did I just spend 2 hours, taking verbling classes or something? I could have done something else. Now you'll remember why this is important to you. So if you have doubt or self-doubt, you can remind yourself. Number 3, focus on exactly what you want to learn. Often the discussion around how to learn a language slides into a debate about so-called traditional versus, so this V here is for versus, I'll write it, traditional versus tech or technological approaches. For Aaron Ralby, director of Linguisticator, this debate misses the point. The question is not so much about online versus offline or app, like application, versus book. Rather, it should be how can we assemble the necessary elements of language for a particular objective, present them in a user-friendly way, and provide a means for students to understand those elements. When signing up to a particular method or approach, think about the substance behind the style or technology. Ultimately, he says, the learning takes place inside you rather than outside, regardless of whether it's a computer or, I would say, a book or a teacher in front of you. So the idea is that as the learner, you are learning. Okay, Victor.
Focus on exactly what you want to learn. Often the discussion around how to learn a language slides into a debate about so-called traditional versus tech approaches. For Aaron Ralby, director of Linguisticator, this debate misses the point. The question is not so much about online versus offline or app versus book. Rather, it should be how can we assemble the necessary elements of language for a particular objective, present them in a user-friendly way, and provide a means for students to understand those elements. When signing up to a particular method or approach, think about the substance behind the style or technology. Ultimately, he says, the learning takes place inside you rather than outside, regardless of whether it's a computer or a book or a teacher in front of you.
Okay, so let's see, the discussion. So when people are talking about language learning, it slides into. So whenever we use this phrase, this little expression here, is to slide into, it means like you start talking about one thing and then it moves to, it becomes kind of a debate. So it kind of changes the focus here. So a lot of times it becomes this debate. A debate is like a back and forth where two people are arguing about different sides. So it becomes this traditional versus text. So like a traditional would be like classroom situation with a textbook and grammar, that type of thing, versus an approach to learning which involves technology. So he's saying, this guy here, that this debate misses the point. So the point is kind of like the most important aspect of a discussion or a topic or a subject. So if you miss the point, you're not really even talking about what is important. So he's saying it's not so much about, so it's not really that, you have to decide should you do studying online or offline or using an application, software or something versus a book or a textbook. That kind of misses the point, he's saying. He says it's not so, that's not really that important. He says we should, it should be how we can assemble. So to assemble something means to put together the necessary elements of language. So, the verb, of course grammar, but of course speaking and listening, all those different things that are part of language learning, you put them together for a particular objective, a specific goal or a specific target that you're trying to reach, and then present that, that way of learning in a what we call a user-friendly way. So for the student who's learning, what is helpful to that person, and of course try to figure out a way to provide a means for. A means is just a way to provide a way for the student to understand what they're trying to learn. So it doesn't really matter whether or not you're trying to learn vocabulary or grammar or, phrasal verbs, things like this, expressions, whether it's online or offline, it's more important to make sure that students just understand. And so the method is not so important. Instead, it's the substance, what's behind it, what's the content that you're actually learning. So that's what he's suggesting here. And you should learn what you really want to learn. So that's the idea here. And it doesn't matter if it's by a computer or a book or with a teacher or not. Number 4 is read for pleasure. For many of our panelists, reading was not only great for making progress, but one of the most rewarding aspects of the learning experience. Alex Rawlings explains that reading for pleasure exposes you to all sorts of vocabulary that you won't find in day-to-day life and normalizes otherwise baffling and complicated grammatical structures. The first book you ever finish in a foreign language is a monumental achievement that you'll remember for a long time. Okay, Amparo.
Read for pleasure. For many of our panelists, reading was not only great for making progress, but one of the most rewarding aspects of the learning experience. Alex Rawlings explained that reading for pleasure exposes you to all sorts of vocabulary that you won't find in day-to-day life, and normalize otherwise bustling and complicated grammatical structures. The first book you ever finish in a foreign language is a monumental achievement that you'll remember for a long time.
So many of the panelists, so those experts, agree, basically. Reading is not only, so this is a way to say, you could just say it's really good for making progress, but this is a different way to say it. So it's not only great for making progress, so improving in your language learning, but, so that's the structure here, not only, but, one of the most rewarding aspects of, so rewarding means you feel good, you get satisfied doing it while you're learning. It's very satisfying, you could say, very rewarding. And the aspect of something just means a part of it. So, you have a language learning experience, and reading is quite rewarding for a lot of people. Not everybody loves reading, but it really can be a good way to improve your vocabulary and make progress and have some fun. That's why I like to do these reading classes. So he says that reading for pleasure. So this is kind of the idea too, making sure that you're enjoying what you're reading. Pleasure means for fun, for satisfaction, because you enjoy it. So it exposes you. That means you get to see lots of different types of vocabulary words, especially the ones that you won't find or hear just in day-to-day life. So if you just watch movies or TV series, or if you just talk to people like in a chatting type of way, you probably won't be as exposed to so much vocabulary, because just general day-to-day talking doesn't involve a lot of different types of words, because you keep talking about the same things over and over. But so that way you can learn more vocabulary by reading. And also normalize. So to make normal some baffling or confusing. Baffling means confusing, hard to understand, and complicated grammatical structures. So, like, for example, when we do the readings, this is why I'm pointing out some uses sometimes of phrasal verbs, the prepositions, the structures. You can actually see them when, instead of trying to hear them or try to speak them, you actually can see them. So it can help you understand the different grammatical structures better. All right, so a monumental achievement. Monumental just means a great, a magnificent achievement, when you read your first book in a foreign language. Number 5, learn vocabulary in context. Memorizing lists of vocabulary can be challenging, not to mention potentially dull. Ed Cook, co-founder and chief executive of Memrise, believes that association is key to retaining new words. A great way to build vocabulary is to make sure the lists you're learning come from situations or texts that you have experienced yourself, so that the content is always relevant and connects to background experience. Okay, Victor?
Learn vocabulary in context. Memorizing lists of vocabulary can be challenging, not to mention potentially dull. Ed Cook, co-founder and chief executive of Memrise, believes that association is key to retaining new words. A great way to build vocabulary is to make sure the lists you are learning come from situations or texts that you have experienced yourself, so that the content is always relevant and connects to background experience.
Mm-hmm. So memorizing lists. So you have a list of words, you know, I got to remember these 100 words this week or something like that, and you just try to memorize it. That can be very challenging, hard to do, doesn't usually last very long. And also, not to mention, not to mention means, you know, you don't want to talk about it, but it's actually probably pretty dull. Dull means boring, you know, just not that fun. So usually most people don't like to just sit and try to memorize vocabulary words. Another way to do it, because it is important to learn vocabulary, that's how you can understand more and more, you want to try to associate, you know, what word you're learning with something maybe related to your own language, or a visual, like an image in your mind, something like that. And he says that is key to retaining. So a key means that's important. That's an important aspect for retaining new words. So retaining means you remember them, you know. So a lot of times you just see a word once or twice, you don't remember it necessarily, but if you can associate it with something else, make connections of things that you already know, that really helps. Of course, make your lists come from situations. So situations would be like an actual conversation or something you have to do, like make a telephone call or to a bank or something like this, or a text that you've been reading. So if you can have your keywords that you want to learn coming from these real-life things, then that will be more helpful to you. So it'll be more relevant. Relevant means important to and useful to your actual situation. And if you can connect it to your background experience. So you've been reading a lot maybe about technology, then you would have a reason to learn a lot of words in that particular subject area. That's the idea. So you have some experience. It's always easier also to learn new vocabulary. For example, if you read an article in your native language, maybe say about a political issue or a news item or something, and then you read it in English, it'll be easier for you to understand because you have some background information about that topic. Number 6, ignore the myths. Age is just a number. You are a monolingual adult. Have you missed the language boat? Ralby argues a key language myth is that it's harder as an adult. Adults and children may learn in different ways, but that shouldn't deter you from committing to learning another language. Languages are simultaneously organic and systematic. As children, we learn languages organically and instinctively. As adults, we can learn them systematically. If you're still not convinced of your chances, Ralby suggests drawing inspiration from early philologists and founders of linguistics who learned dozens of languages to encyclopedic levels as adults. Okay, Amparo.
Ignore the myths. Age is just a number. You're a monolingual,
Monolingual, yeah.
monolingual adult. Had you missed the language boat? Bobby argues a key language myth is that it's harder as an adult. Adults and children may learn in different ways, but that shouldn't deter your committing to learning another language. Languages are simultaneously organic and systematic. As children, we learn languages organically and instinctively. As adults, we can learn them systematically. If you're still not convinced of your chances, Ralby suggests drawing inspiration from early philologists and founders of linguistics who learned thousands of languages to encyclopedic levels as adults.
Okay. All right, so you are a monolingual adult. So you only speak one language. That's monolingual versus like bilingual, trilingual, multilingual, that kind of thing. Here's an expression: have you missed the boat? So in this case, the language boat. But when somebody says, you've missed the boat, or have you missed the boat, it means, is it too late for you? That's the idea of missing the boat. It's too late. The boat is gone and you don't have a chance to catch it or something. So it's
the train.
Yeah, you can miss the train too. Yeah, we say that too. So either one. In this case, regarding the language, is it too late for you to learn a new language? That's kind of the meaning of that expression. And that's a myth. So a myth is something that people believe, but it's not actually true. So it's a key language myth. So it's an important myth that people keep believing over and over, even though it's not necessarily accurate or true. So they're just mentioning that adults and children may learn in different ways. So that might be true, but it shouldn't deter you from committing. So deter you from something means to keep you from doing it, to stop you from doing it. Like, oh, I'm 40, I can't learn a new language. That's going to stop you from trying even to do it. So it shouldn't deter you from committing. So committing here means to try to do it. To commit to doing something means you say to yourself, I'm going to do this for the next 3 months and see how it works, that kind of thing. That's a commitment. Languages are simultaneously. So simultaneously means at the same time. So they can both be organic, which means like you just learn like a child, listening, having people talk to you, trying to say things, making mistakes, correcting yourself, that kind of thing. That's organic. You don't have to go to school as a 1-year-old to try to learn a language. It just happens for you naturally. And it can also be systematic, though, where you actually learn a system. That's how you learn the language, by using some kind of system. So as a child, you learn languages organically and instinctively. So it's part of being a human being. As long as you are talked to and you hear language, you are going to learn a language. Doesn't matter which one. But as an adult, we can actually learn by using a system, like a grammatical system. We can learn what it means, why do you use a verb here or a noun, and we can analyze the language a little more, and that's another way to learn. If you're still not convinced of your chances, to be convinced of something means you believe it. So, maybe you still are like, I don't know if I can really do this. My chances aren't good. So if you think you don't have a chance, it means you don't have a possibility. It's not really going to happen. But you can draw inspiration, like this guy suggests, to draw inspiration from, that's the expression. It means to get inspired by these people, by other things that have happened. So you can look to these other people who have done it before you, and therefore show you the way. They can inspire you. So lots of people, philologists and linguistics, people who've studied languages and sounds of words and things, they have learned dozens. So, a dozen is 12, to encyclopedic level. So having a lot of knowledge. If you have an encyclopedic level of knowledge, it means you can say a lot of things in that one language. So they learned a lot, and they were doing it as adults. Number 7, do some revision of your native language. Speaking your first language may be second nature, but that doesn't necessarily mean you understand it well. Kirsten Hems, editor of the Fluent Language blog, believes you can't make good progress in a second language until you understand your own. I think understanding your native language and just generally how language works is so essential before you launch yourself at a bunch of foreign phrases. Okay. Okay, Victor. Hi, Emmanuel. You can go ahead, Victor, and then we'll throw Emmanuel next.
Okay. Do some revision of your native language. Speaking your first language may be second nature, but that doesn't necessarily mean you understand it well. Kirsten Hammes, editor of the Fluent Language blog, believes you can't make good progress in a second language until you understand your own. I think understanding your native language and just generally how language works is so essential before you launch yourself at a bunch of foreign phrases.
So to do some revision means the verb to revise means, take a look again at something. So, a lot of times, a lot of people don't actually understand their own native language, how it works. Especially here in the United States, I would say probably at least from when I was a kid, the 70s and later, grammar has not necessarily been a very important subject. So yes, we learn about nouns and verbs and things like this, but it's not necessarily been taught specifically. So a lot of people in the United States, at least, don't have a really great knowledge of English grammar. So this is the suggestion here, is maybe you want to make sure you understand how a language works. Let's see. Speaking your first language may be second nature. So if something is second nature to you, it just means you don't have to think about it. It comes as natural to you. So when you think about speaking your first language, you don't have to really think about it. You don't have to think, oh, should I use a phrasal verb here? What preposition should I be using? You don't have to think. You just know already. But it doesn't necessarily mean you understand what's happening. Like you could explain it to somebody who's learning, or give a reason why you used this preposition or this verb. So there some languages do have some rules. Sometimes they don't always work, but we do have rules. So she thinks it's a good idea to understand your own language. In fact, I was just going through some books, and I have this book here which is called English Grammar for Students of Spanish. So we have a lot of these types of books in the language learning section of bookstores, where it has English grammar for students of other languages, so that it can kind of explain to you the differences, so you actually understand your native language better as well. And so that's something that she thinks is essential or important. It's necessary before you launch yourself, before you start learning a bunch of foreign phrases. You might want to understand how language in general, specifically your native language, actually works, so you can use that understanding to help you understand how another language might work. Number 8, don't underestimate the importance of translation. Different approaches may be necessary at different stages of the learning process. Once you have reached a certain level of proficiency and can say quite a bit fairly accurately, Rebecca Braun, senior lecturer in German studies at Lancaster University, says it is typical to feel a slowing down in progress. Translation, she says, is such an important exercise for helping you get over a certain excuse me, plateau that you will reach as a language learner. Translation exercises don't allow you to paraphrase and force the learner onto the next level. Excuse me. Okay, Emmanuel. Yeah, some water I need.
Hello everyone. What's the class about?
Hi, Emmanuel. We're reading, so I read first, and then you read along, and then I explain some of the words.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
What you can do is read this part that I just read, this number 8.
Okay, you passed the link?
Yeah, you can.
You sent us the link.
Can you see it on your screen?
Yeah, and I can.
Okay.
And I can see this.
Cool.
Thank you, teacher. Sorry for sorry for before I couldn't. My micro doesn't work very well, but now it's working.
Okay. Great. Do you want to read that one?
Okay. Allowed?
Yes.
Allowed?
Okay.
Don't underestimate the importance of translation. Different approaches may be necessary at different stages of the learning process. Once you have reached a certain level of proficiency and can say quite a bit. Fairly currently, Rebecca Braun, senior lecturer in German studies at Lancaster University, says it is typical to feel a slowing down in progress. Translation. She says, it's such an important exercise for helping you get over a certain plateau. Is okay? Plateau? It's a French
Yeah.
word, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a French word. A plateau.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
That you will reach as a language learner. The translation exercises don't allow you to paraphrase and force the learner on the next level. Teacher, what is paraphrase?
To paraphrase something means to say it using different words. So what she's saying here is if you're doing some kind of translation exercise, like for example, you had to translate this sentence here, instead of just saying it in different words in English, that would be paraphrasing it like what it means is this. You have to actually translate so that you're translating like word for word or the meaning into Spanish, for example. So instead
Okay.
of paraphrase, yeah, if I asked you, for example, to paraphrase this paragraph here, you would tell me what it said, but you would use your own words. That's the idea of paraphrasing.
Yeah, it's like a paraphrase is like a Google Translate don't use that, isn't it? But because uh, Google Translate translate every single word, or
Yeah,
not a
right,
phrase.
right, yeah. So I'll explain some words here, and then I'll explain that one again. So don't underestimate. So if you underestimate something, it means you don't think it's that important when it can be very important. So a lot of people have different approaches at different stages. So when you're a beginner and you don't know anything, you're probably going to need some translation. You have to understand what this word is. Certainly for some nouns, for example, you can just use a picture. This is a banana, this is a table, this is a car, that kind of thing. But later you need some translation to help you go to the next level, perhaps. So she's saying this, when you reach a certain level, so now you're at an intermediate level or something, and maybe you're quite proficient, so you have a level of proficiency or of mastery, of ability, and you can say quite a few things fairly accurately, so you're doing pretty well. She says people often feel a slowing down in progress, so maybe you feel like you've reached a plateau. That's what a plateau is, like a flat line. A plateau is actually like a tabletop or something. We call that a plateau. So it's a flat, you've been going up and up and up, making progress, and now the line has kind of evened out, and now you're just kind of a flat line. And so you want to make more progress, and so she says maybe something like translation exercises that are more difficult, that could help you. So instead of just paraphrasing and talking about it, you might want to actually translate something exactly into a good Spanish sentence, for example, rather than just saying, oh, well, they mean this. That would be paraphrasing. And this forces you to the next level, so to really understand what's happening with the language. Number 9, beware of fluency. Many of the panelists were cautious of the F word. Hams argues not only is it difficult to define what fluency is, but as a goal, it is so much bigger than it deserves to be. Language learning never stops because it's culture learning, personal growth, and endless improvement. I believe that this is where learners go wrong. So the F word is not the cuss word, the F word, but rather the word fluency. So Amparo, why don't you go ahead and read that?
Beware of fluency. Many of the panelists were cautious of the F word. Hence, argues not only is it difficult to define what fluency is, but as a goal it is so much bigger that it deserves to be. Language learning never stops because it's culture learning, personal growth, and endless improvement. I believe that this is where learners go wrong.
Mm-hmm. All right, so many of the panelists, so again, the people who were talking about this issue on the panel, and the group of people, they were cautious. Cautious means they didn't really want to say too much about it, maybe. They didn't want to make it bigger than it really needs to be. So she argues, to argue something means she gives her point of view. So she thinks it's not only difficult to define, like what is fluency? Does it mean you can say everything you want to say in the language? Does it mean you never make a mistake? What does it actually mean? It's hard to define. People define it differently. And she says it's also a goal, as a target, something you want to achieve. It's so much bigger than it deserves to be. So a lot of people say, I just want to be fluent in the language. They don't even know exactly what they're talking about, and maybe it's not, it's not that important. It's not the most important thing, perhaps, because she says language learning never stops. Because as you're learning a language, you're also doing all these other things. You're learning about culture. You're learning about yourself, personal growth, and you're endlessly improving. Endlessly, like always. You're never going to stop improving. So even in your own native language, as long as you continue to read and participate in life, you're always learning new words, new expressions, new ways to express yourself. So it's the same way when you're learning a language, a foreign language. She says this is where learners go wrong. So this is like a mistake. If you go wrong, it's like you make a mistake. So don't make the mistake of focusing so much on fluency. Maybe do some of these other things they suggest. All right, so number 10, go to where the language is spoken. It may not be an option for everyone, but Braun reminds us that if you are serious about learning the language and getting direct pleasure from what you have learned, you need to go to where that language is spoken. Travel and living abroad can complement learning in the classroom. The books and verb charts may be the easiest way to ensure you expose yourself to the language at home, but the people and the culture will far outclass them once you get to the country where your language is spoken. Okay, Victor.
Go to where the language is spoken. It may not be an option for everyone, but Brown reminds us that if you are serious about learning the language and getting direct pleasure from what you have learned, you need to go to where that language is spoken. Travel and living abroad can complement learning in the classroom. The books and verb charts may be the easiest way to ensure you expose yourself to the language at home, but the people and the culture will far outclass them once you get to the country where the language is spoken.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so of course it may not be an option for everyone. An option is like you have the possibility of doing it. So you might not be able to go to another country, but somebody who's very, very serious about learning, somebody who might really need it for their job, getting into a school, something like that, you might want to try to get to where that language is spoken. That's the idea here, getting direct pleasure from what you've learned. So even, maybe if you've been learning a language for a while, to really be able to use it, you sometimes have to go to another country. Depends on what language. English, a lot of times you don't nowadays because you have things like Verbling, and you might use English in your day-to-day life with business colleagues or in school or something like that, even if you're living in a different country where the English is not the native language. But for other languages, you might, if you study Finnish, you might want to go to Finland sometime to use it. That would be more fun to actually be able to use it. So travel and living abroad, so living in another country, can complement. So if something complements something, it goes along together. So it can be a nice addition to what you've been learning, either in the classroom or I would say on your own, because a lot of people learn languages by themselves these days on the internet and stuff. And so the quote here is that books and verb charts, so learning how to conjugate verbs and things, is the easiest way to ensure you expose yourself to. So to ensure means to make sure. To expose yourself to something means to experience. So you want to, reading books, doing things at home is a good way to, have experience with the language, but the people that speak that language and the culture that's using that language will far outclass them. Outclass here means it'll just be better. One thing is reading a book, listening to podcasts or something like that, watching a TV show, but actually interacting with people and a different culture is, more exciting is what that means. To outclass somebody is better. Okay, so as language learners yourselves, What do you guys agree with these things? What do you think about this article, Amparo? Do all of these things seem pretty obvious to you, or are they helpful?
For example, the next year I will take an FC examination.
Uh-huh.
That is my goal. Is achieve an intermediate level and learn some kind of vocabulary, language to be fluent. I think in slang words maybe um, a
Are more difficult, maybe?
no
No?
push yourself to be fluent. It's okay. So maybe
Uh-huh.
think fluent when you are using a street language.
Street
Okay.
language, yeah.
Yeah. No academic language only.
Uh-huh.
Is my first goal for the next year is to be an intermediate level, achieve an intermediate level that is a
It's,
realistic goal,
uh-huh.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So having that goal, helps you figure out what you need to do. So if you're focused on, I want to be able to really speak well using more street language versus academic language, then you would focus on that. You would watch movies and TV shows, listen to music, learn that type of, yeah. Exactly. And if your goal was, to pass a test or something, then you would have to do something different. It wouldn't be the same learning strategies that you would have to follow. So yeah, I think I agree with the specific goals is good. Sometimes it's hard to figure out a specific goal. Like, a lot of people say, I just want to be fluent, but that's not really a specific goal because, what does it even mean to be fluent? Do you want to be able to talk about everything?
Yeah.
Or,
I watched Robert Kiyosaki interview that
Yeah.
he talked about the American know only and 3,000 words of the dictionary, but they don't manage the 10,000 words that in business you have to use. You to be able to make a networking, you have to manage some kind of words related to what your job is, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, anytime you are, talking about a different subject matter like finances, so Robert Kiyosaki is all about finances and personal finances, you're going to need to learn a lot of new vocabulary. Even if English is your native language, you might not know that vocabulary yet. So yeah, for sure. So if you're interested in finances, you would read people like Robert Kiyosaki and other books and articles and listen to podcasts and radio shows and all kinds of stuff like that. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Victor, what about you? What do you think about this article?
There are interesting tips, but probably I don't agree with most of them.
Okay, why not?
For example, make realistic specific goals. And many people say that they want to speak English fluently.
Yeah.
It seems to me I am one of them. I just want to, yes, I want to speak fluently. I want to understand you 100%, and it's all what I want. But what if I make mistake? I make realistic specific goal. For example, I want to learn how to read in newspaper.
Yeah.
But what if I didn't do that?
Well, I think it gives you something to work towards, because a lot of people, when they say I just want to be fluent in English, they don't know where to start. They don't know what to read, what to listen to, what to watch. It's too big. So
even in your native language. For example, I'm from Paraguay, and there are kind of words that I can't use because I'm not in the I'm not, I don't know well the for example low words, low vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't manage well the context, you maybe don't know, and you maybe that doesn't mean that you are not fluent. It doesn't mean that you don't know the word, the specific you say
Right.
the
With terminology or something.
yeah, you don't know the terminology. You are not in the environment of the law of law of you are not interact with lawyers or judges. You are not in the
In the
you are not
environment, yeah, of that.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. So a specific goal could be like, I have some people, for example, Amparo, you mentioned phrasal verbs. So a specific goal could just be like, for this week, I'm going to focus on phrasal verbs, meaning I'm going to listen for them when I'm listening to something. I'm going to try to use some when I'm speaking, and I'm going to, underline them or highlight them when I read an article or something like that. And I'm going to really study and try to understand what they mean and how to start using them. That could be a specific goal, and that will help you become fluent, of course. But fluency is the large goal. And like Emmanuel says, you can be fluent, like a 5-year-old is fluent in English, for example. A kid can be considered fluent. They speak English. They understand you. But they don't know how to talk about all kinds of things,
yeah.
Yeah.
The,
Amparo, did you want to comment?
Yes, I think all of the tips that they said,
Yeah.
they sound like just when you write something, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not so real.
Mm.
I agree that sometimes it helps to know about your grammar in your own language, and
Mm-hmm.
yes, and I that is a problem that I've seen here. For example, from time to time, I just say it in classes in,
Mm-hmm.
an article, a preposition, and people don't know what that is.
Right.
Or yes, I'm thinking that is more challenging for them try to understand the grammar in English if they don't know their own grammar.
Yeah.
So I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you establish your goals and yes, maybe I can say I want to talk in just 3 months, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Right. Right.
You can establish that, but it's not
Right.
easy to get.
I
Yeah.
completely
So
agree with you because, for example, where are you from?
from Ecuador.
Yeah, I am from Paraguay. For example, in Spanish we have participio, that is kind of the participle that is the past participle is similar. You could manage that much better if you know your own grammar in your native language,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you can understand some differences and and not fight with the language so much. A lot of people, they're like fighting, like, why is it like this? And you can understand, and you can also understand there may be differences, but it does have a structure. It does
But
have a
I think,
system.
but I
Yeah.
think that the adults have more that kind of who's let me
That
see.
understanding, maybe, to understand grammar.
Let me see one moment, please. That adults have more that type of trouble, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
They always making her mind questions about why is the, is why is why it is like this.
Yeah, I would say adults argue more, and they want to know specifically, but why? Why do you use this? Why? And a child doesn't ask why. They just say, okay, just that's
They
the way
only
it is.
they are like in a sponge. They
Yeah.
absorb what they hear and what they read, why they are seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't ask for explanations as much. That's true.
Uh,
And
It's,
you, yeah.
much better, it's much easier for kids to learn different kind of languages because
Because I think that's one reason why. Yeah, and they're not embarrassed to make mistakes either. It's okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for coming and reading along. So, with anything, you take what you like and leave the rest. And if it works for you and it's helpful, it's great. And if not, it's okay. Everybody finds their own way in language learning. That's for sure. Thanks for coming. I have another class next, so maybe I'll see you there. If not, take care. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you
Today
so
we
much,
See you.
teacher.
Bye. Bye,
teach
guys.
again, teacher.
Goodbye
Yeah.
and see you.
Manuel?